Was Edward I a ruthless tyrant or a brilliant strategist? Did his son inherit his father's ambition or a fatal flaw? And what dark secrets lay buried beneath the gilded splendor of the Plantagenet court? Let's unravel the tangled threads of power, betrayal, and a kingdom teetering on the brink, starting with the shadow of the hammer of the Scots. The rain lashed against the stone walls of Berg by Sands, mirroring the grim mood within. July 7, 1307. Edward I, the king who'd bled Scotland dry, the man who'd built a vast empire, lay dying. Not a glorious battlefield death, but a slow, agonizing fade in a drafty chamber, the Scottish prize a kingdom stubbornly refusing to yield, still tantalizingly out of reach. His head, meticulously dispatched, was destined for the Prince of Wales, a chillingly formal gesture in a reign already steeped in unsettling currents. Just 3 days later, Robert Bruce, a name that would become synonymous with rebellion, tasted victory at Loudon Hill, a tiny spark igniting a wildfire of discontent. But the story doesn't end with a king's demise. It's 1297, and the air hangs thick with accusations. The remonstrances, a furious document penned by disgruntled barons, weren't just complaining about taxes, they were screaming about the way those taxes were levied. Edward, obsessed with rebuilding after a disastrous Scottish campaign, was squeezing the kingdom dry, and the people weren't buying it. Then there was Tallagio, a challenge to the very legitimacy of his authority, questioning his right to plunder the nation's wealth. It was a storm brewing, and Edward, caught in its eye, was desperately trying to shore up his defenses. March 1299. The king, looking like a startled rabbit, practically fled London. No dignified confirmation of the Charter of the Forest, just a hasty retreat. A year later, before a parliament bristling with opposition, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Earl of Norfolk, armed with grievances from both the clergy and the common folk, laid bare the cracks in his authority. The king predictably tried to wriggle free, issuing the Articuli Super Cartas, a document so broad, so laden with caveats that it was practically useless. It's the king's will. The 20th, a traditional tax, became a conditional promise, a glittering lure that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Then, in January 1301, a parliament returned, eerily mirroring the previous one. Chief Justice Roger Brabazon, a man with a penchant for audacious requests, demanded a 15th, a staggering sum. Instead, he was presented with Keithley's bill, a document so pointed, so defiant, that it felt like a direct challenge. It demanded the observance of Magna Carta and the Charter of the Forest, called for a survey of the royal forests, and demanded a return to the annual farm, the old way of taxation. The king, predictably, was enraged. He imprisoned Keithley, a knight of the Shire, but the Parliament, emboldened, forced him to concede the perambulation of the forests and an investigation into royal abuses. And then, a shocking demand: the Commons wanted a say in appointing the king's ministers. A direct challenge to the established order, a harking back to the baronial reformers who'd once held Edward I in check. The king, a man known for his explosive temper, unleashed a torrent of sarcasm, questioning the representatives' motives, suggesting they were merely seeking to rule in his stead. The crisis of 1301 wasn't just about money, it was about power. The king, increasingly reliant on foreign loans, turned to the Florentine banking house of Frescobaldi, a shadowy alliance that would prove disastrous. But the debt piled up, reaching a staggering £200,000 by Edward's death, a testament to his extravagant spending and the kingdom's mounting financial woes. And then, the unthinkable. In the summer of 1303, the royal treasure vanished. Not a small theft, but a brazen heist of £100,000 plate, jewels, foreign coins pilfered from the crypt beneath Westminster Abbey. The thieves, led by a cunning Oxfordshire merchant named Richard Pudlicott, weren't amateurs. They'd chipped their way into the vault, aided by a sacristan, a sub-prior, and a host of monks and servants. A second theft, a brazen raid on the refectory, confirmed the conspiracy. The theft wasn't just a loss of wealth, it was a symbolic blow to the crown's authority, a searing indictment of its vulnerability. The investigation, led by John Droxford, the king's loyal clerk and future bishop, uncovered a network of corruption that reached the highest levels of the abbey. William Palmer, a shadowy figure known as William of the Palace, a deputy keeper of the Westminster Palace and Fleet Prison, was a key player. John of St. Albans, a mason, and John of Newmarket, a goldsmith, completed the rogues' gallery. Even Hugh Port, a London sheriff, was implicated, suggesting that corruption had infiltrated the very heart of the city. This wasn't a random act of theft, it was a calculated assault on the king's prestige, a desperate gamble fueled by a ruler increasingly isolated and vulnerable. But the story doesn't end with arrests and executions. In June 1305, a bitter feud erupted between Edward I and his son, Prince Edward. A dispute over a conflict in Scotland, a battle between the young prince and the treasurer Walter Langton, led to the prince's banishment and the severing of his access to provisions. It took 6 weeks and the Queen's intervention to bring him back, but the damage was done. Then in the autumn of 1306, the king's temper flared again. 26 young knights, deserting from the Scottish campaign to pursue tournaments in France, were arrested and imprisoned in the Tower. Edward, a man known for his volatile emotions, unleashed a furious tirade, questioning their loyalty and threatening to punish them harshly. Meanwhile, Edward's health was deteriorating. In October 1306, he sought refuge in Lanercost Priory, but his condition worsened, forcing him to travel to Carlisle. A flurry of physicians, Richard of Montpellier, the royal apothecary, arrived with exotic herbs and medicines, anticipating an embalming. Yet against all odds, Edward survived the winter, preparing for another campaign against the Scots. The final weeks of Edward's life were a whirlwind of desperate measures and private anxieties. A confrontation with his son, Prince Edward, in the spring of 1307, recounted by Walter of Gisborough, revealed a shocking level of animosity. Walter Langton, the treasurer, requested permission to appoint Piers Gaveston, a controversial nobleman, as a count. Edward's response was brutal, a display of rage and contempt that left the prince humiliated. The king, in a moment of uncontrolled fury, tore at the prince's hair, a chilling testament to his volatile temper. The death itself was quiet, almost anticlimactic. On July 7, 1307, Edward I died in a draughty chamber at Berg by Sands, the Scottish prize still beyond his grasp. His head, dispatched to the Prince of Wales, was a final, chilling reminder of his ambition and his failures. The news was delayed, deliberately suppressed to avoid encouraging the Scots. The king's journal remained stubbornly silent for 10 days, and writs, the instruments of royal authority, continued to be sealed with the Great Seal. Finally, on October 18th, Edward I was laid to rest in Westminster Abbey, surrounded by the trappings of his power, a red silk tunic, a scepter, and open crown. The inscription on his tomb, Edwardus Primus Scotorum Malleus Hic Est, 1308, Pactum Serva, here lies Edward I, Hammer of the Scots, 1308, Keep Faith, was a boastful declaration of his achievements, a desperate attempt to salvage his legacy. But the truth, as always, was far more complex. Was Edward I a ruthless tyrant or a brilliant strategist? Did his son inherit his father's ambition or a fatal flaw? And what dark secrets lay buried beneath the gilded splendor of the Plantagenet court? The answers, like the kingdom itself, remain shrouded in shadows, waiting to be unearthed.